Today we're going to be discussing how to create both 2D and 3D videos within PTV Vissim. And as a part of this, we're going to look at setting up different camera positions in both 2D and 3D mode, and then using those positions to develop different storyboards and keyframes. And then we're also going to take a look at adding in 3D information signs within the network, and we're going to look at how those can be set up and used. And then finally, we're going to look at setting up the animation recording so that you can record those animations and then you can replay those simulation graphics later on at another time. So before we get into the actual recording of the 2D and 3D videos, we have to do a little bit of setup first. And the very first thing we'll need to do is create different camera positions within the network. And then we'll create a storyboard, which can then be used to generate these different videos. And within each of these storyboards, we'll then set up different keyframes, which are going to be linked back to those camera positions we added at the beginning. All right, so first up, we're going to look at creating those camera positions. First, we're going to do it in 3D mode, and then we're going to go back to 2D mode and see how those are set up as well. So in order to add those 3D camera positions, first we're going to need to switch from the default 2D mode over to the 3D mode. And you can get to 3D mode in a couple of ways. You can either click on this 3D box graphic that's in the network editor toolbar, or you can also use the short key. You can press Control and D at the same time, and that will also switch back and forth between the 2D and the 3D mode. And then once you are in 3D mode, you can zoom around like you normally would using the mouse scroll wheel. But then you can also use, there's some special 3D settings you can choose from. So first is the rotation icon that's highlighted here. And this will allow you to go ahead and rotate that 3D camera when you're in that 3D mode. And then the other option is to select this hand icon that's currently selected. And this will allow you to shift and pan throughout that network in 3D mode. So then once you have your network editor kind of set up to the desired view within that 3D mode, and you're kind of satisfied with the current setting that's set up, you can then start to add in those camera positions. So in order to add those, you'll just select that camera icon that's in the network editor toolbar, and then you can click the Add button. And this will allow you to add in a new camera position. And it'll first open up this text field where you can type in the name for that camera position. And then once you have that set, you can click the check mark there, and that will save that camera position and store it within this particular Vissim file. And once that's saved, you'll then see some additional options that are going to appear for each of those camera positions. So if you kind of hover over on the right side, you'll see those three options appear. And the first one here is that pencil icon. And you can use that, first of all, if you need to rename a camera position or update that. You can also readjust the position. So if you want to maybe change the angle that you have currently set up, or the location altogether, you can go ahead and move the camera within the network editor. And then once you have that repositioned, you can select that middle icon button there. And that's going to actually just update that camera position and will overwrite the existing one that you've already created. And then finally, if you do want to just remove that position and start again, you can always use that X button, and that will just delete that camera position from this view. And in addition to creating those different roadway camera positions in 3D, you can also create different camera positions from within a vehicle from the perspective of a driver. So in order to set these up, the regular 3D roadway camera positions can just be set up before the simulation is running. But in this case, in order to actually get into the particular vehicle, first you'll just need to run that simulation to have those vehicles be generated. And then in order to to get the driver perspective camera positions, you'll also need to still be in 3D mode. And then while the simulation is running, and once you kind of have that particular vehicle that you want to grab that driver perspective from, you'll just double click that vehicle, and then from there you'll actually enter in to this driver perspective mode. And so you'll see the network editor view will kind of shift, and you'll just be kind of spacing out from that driver perspective, and you'll see the other cars in front of you and around that particular vehicle. And then once you are in this driver's perspective, you can then add a new camera position just like we did in 3D mode. You can just go ahead and go to the camera icon here on the network editor toolbar, and then you can click add and type in a new name for that particular camera position. And then that will be saved, and which we can use later on once we talk about the keyframes and storyboards. All right, so now that's kind of covered all of the 3D camera positions. So now if we go back into 2D mode, which again you can do by either pressing that 3D box icon, or you can just press Control-D to switch back to that 2D mode. So once you're in 2D mode, this will be just like 3D mode where you can select the camera button again, and then you can add a new camera position in here. And depending on which mode you're in, when you're in 2D mode, you'll only see those 2D camera positions show up in this window, whereas if you're in 3D mode, you'll only see those 3D camera positions that have been added within that particular mode. And then if you would like to view kind of all the camera positions for both 2D and 3D mode in detail, you can go up to that presentation menu item and then choose the camera positions item from the top of that menu. And that's going to open up a list down at the bottom of the network editor. And this will show you again a list of all of those camera positions. So you'll see the names here, as well as all of those X, Y, Z coordinates and some of the angle information. And then you'll also see here, there's a new graphics mode that's been added, so you can see whether that camera position is a 3D mode camera position or a 2D mode camera position. All right, so now that we have those camera positions created, we can go ahead and start to take a look at creating a storyboard. So all of the storyboards are going to be housed, again, under that presentation menu, and then under the storyboard selection right underneath the camera position. And this is going to open up a storyboard list down at the bottom. And from here, you can, again, just select that green plus button, and that will get you started with a new storyboard that you can then edit. So the way that this window is laid out, the storyboard information is all housed on that left side of the window. And then on the right-hand side, by default, it's going to be set up to show those keyframes in that child window. And when you first add a new keyframe, like in this case, we've just added one here. In this case, we don't have any keyframes added, so you'll see right here, we don't have any on that child window on the right. But once we start adding those keyframes, you'll see a list will start to populate over here. So for each of the storyboards, you can set up a name for them. This will kind of be like one particular video, so you can create as many storyboards as you would like if you want to create a whole bunch of different videos throughout that simulation. So you can name them here in order to just keep track of kind of what each video is showcasing. You can then set up the desired resolution, which by default is set to 1920 by 1080p. And there are some different options you can choose from the little drop-down menu. You can also choose to turn that AVI video recording on or off for that particular storyboard. So if you do have a whole group and maybe you're satisfied with maybe the first two videos and you want to just turn those off, you can uncheck those and those will no longer be recorded. And then here's where you can type in a name and location to save that AVI recording. If you just type in a name here, it's going to just save this video file within that same directory wherever your Vissim network is saved. And then you can also set the frame rate, which by default is set to 20 frames per second. And right beside that, you'll also see there's a real-time factor. So in this case, this video is going to be captured at 2 times real time. However, if you would like to record a video at real time, you can set this frame rate to 10, which is going to be equal to that default simulation resolution that's set within the simulation parameters. And that by default is set to 10 time steps per simulation second. So if you set this frame rate to 10 as well, you'll see this real-time factor will drop down to 1 if you want to capture any video at real time. All right, so now that we have a storyboard added, we can now start to take a look at adding in those keyframes, which again are going to be linked to those camera positions that we added earlier. So in order to add a keyframe, you can just select that plus button that's here in the child window to the right of those storyboards. And this will open up the keyframe window where you can do some further editing. So in here, you can set up the start time for that camera position as well as the dwell time. So how long that camera position is just going to sit there at that particular location. You can then choose the camera position here. So this is a drop-down list which will show you all of those different 2D and 3D camera positions that we created. So you can just choose an option from here. And then down here near the bottom, you can select different types of movement. And this will kind of define how the camera moves from one camera position to the next camera position. So you can set up, there's a constant speed option where you can have that camera position kind of move at a constant speed between the two. You can choose a smooth option, which is typically set by default. And this will kind of have the motion any close to the keyframes be a bit slower and then kind of speed up when it's traveling between those positions. There's also a smooth start where the beginning keyframe position is going to start kind of with increasing speed, and then it's going to move with more constant speed towards the next keyframe. And then kind of on the opposite side, we've got smooth end, which will have that beginning keyframe start out with a constant speed, and then it's gradually going to slow down as it travels to that next keyframe position. So these are just different default options you can choose when you're trying to set up those different transitions between those camera positions. And then the transition time, which you're mostly going to see here in the keyframe child window. This is not a particular option within the keyframe window itself, but this transition time is going to be automatically calculated by Vissim. And what's going to happen is it's going to take a look at the current camera position, start time and dwell time, and add those together. So in this case, we've got 900 plus a 60-second dwell, so we have about 960 seconds. And it's going to subtract that from the next camera position start time, which in this case is 980, leaving us with a transition time of 20 seconds. So Vissim is going to use this, both the start and dwell time of the current position and the start time of the next position, in order to automatically calculate the time it's going to take that camera to move from one position to the next. And in this case, like if you're moving maybe from two positions that are really close together, you might want that transition time to be a bit shorter, maybe 5 or 10 seconds, just depending on the distance. Whereas if you're kind of moving from maybe like an overview position, kind of zooming into another location on the network, you might want that one to be a bit longer, maybe 20 or 30 seconds, just depending on kind of that distance that that camera has to travel. This is kind of a fine-tuning process that you can do just to see kind of what looks best when you're creating these videos. And then if you have added multiple keyframes, but if you do realize that maybe you need to edit one of those, usually either in the beginning or somewhere in the middle, there is an option within the keyframes itself where you can choose this Shift Subsequent Keyframes option. And this will essentially allow you to automatically update all of the different start times for the following keyframes. So in this case, we've got an example here where we've opened up keyframe number 3. In this case, we hadn't set any dwell time, so really the camera was just going to move and then not really sit there at all and then move on to the next position. So in this case, we would like to add in a dwell time here. So we've opened up this keyframe window here on the left side and added in a dwell time of 60 seconds. And then we have that shift subsequent keyframes option selected as well. And what that's going to do is then add in that 60-second dwell time for keyframe number 3. And then it's also going to automatically shift keyframe number 4 start time for us up 60 seconds. So again, this is just a really helpful option if you have a large list of keyframes and you just want to kind of keep everything else the same, but just make a small change somewhere either in the beginning or the middle, where you just want to maybe update again those start times or dwell times, and then everything else will kind of just shift in sequence and update automatically for you. So once you have some of those keyframes added and you just kind of want to see what that video looks like, you can do a preview and kind of see how all of those keyframes work together and then make any final edits before actually recording the video. So in order to preview any of these, you can just right-click on the storyboard over on the right-hand side, and then you can choose one of the two options. You can either preview with the AVI speed or with the simulation speed. And that will open up a separate window where you can just kind of see the camera starting at each of these positions, and then you'll be able to see the transitions as well and just see how everything looks, and then make any further edits from there. All right, so now that we've got kind of everything set up, we've got our storyboards with our different keyframes tied to those camera positions. So now we can finally start to record those simulation videos. So in order to start generating that video recording, first you'll just go back to that presentation menu, and then you can select the Record AVIs option. It's also recommended that you also choose this 3D anti-aliasing, and this will just produce some higher quality videos and kind of remove any of those jagged pixel edges, so just kind of to create a smoother video. It will take a bit longer to record, but again, it will create a better quality video. And then as long as you have those options selected, from here you can just press the play button to start the simulation. And then this will bring up another pop-up box here where you can choose a different video compressor, just depending on what you have installed on your computer. A good default option here is this Microsoft Video 1 that you can choose that is usually typically installed on most computers. So you can just choose whichever compressor you have or prefer, and then you can select OK, and then the simulation will just start to run as normal. And then while the simulation is running, once that video is actually being recorded, you'll notice that some of these preview windows will start to appear. In this case, we've got two different videos recording kind of simultaneously. So we've got a 2D video and a 3D video. So in this case, we have two different preview windows that show up. And you'll see here that those will actually show the video, the vehicle animation within both of those videos. And this is just, again, a preview window that'll be overlaid on top of that Vissim network, just so that you can see that that video is actually being recorded. One quick note is that you can also have that quick view turned on up here, and this will still record the vehicle animation even if that is turned on. We'll typically turn this on, especially if we're recording a video in the middle of the simulation, just so that we can kind of speed up through the first part and get to the actual video recording. But even with that quick view on, again, that video graphics will still be recorded in the video. Within the videos, you can also turn on any background imagery. So if you want to turn on any Bing maps, you can select that background imagery option, and those will also be recorded as well. And then once everything is recorded, the final AVI videos are going to show up in the location that's been set based on that storyboard. Again, here with whatever's set in that file name. Typically, if you just type in a name here, it's just going to store it in the same location as that Vissim network. And then you can go from here and view those videos and then go back to Vissim if you need to make any further updates. If you need to shift any of maybe the start times or the dwell times, you can go back and re-record those videos. So here's a couple of examples, just showcasing some of those recorded videos. So on the left-hand side here, we have a 2D video recording. And then on the right, upper right corner, we've got a 3D video recording here. So you'll see when you're recording 2D videos, you can capture a lot of the simulation details. So you can record any 2D graphic parameters options. Like in this case, we're showing the link speed. And then you can also capture network objects within the network as well. And those will all be recorded within the video. And then if you do want 2D mode to just only show the vehicles and the signal heads, maybe you want to turn off like your reduced speed areas and your routing decisions and not have those show up in the video, you can turn on that simple network display, or again, you can just turn manually on or off any of those network object visuals if you do not want those to be recorded. And if you note up in the upper right-hand corner, again, we've got that 3D mode playing. In 3D mode, you cannot do any of like the 2D graphic parameter coloring, so you won't be able to record any of the link coloring options or see any of the other 2D network objects like signal heads. However, you can change the vehicle coloring scheme. So in this case, you've got the vehicles coloring by driving state and also have that legend showing up here as well. So if you do want to record any vehicle coloring options in 3D, those can be accounted for. But 2D does have quite a bit of options if you want to do, again, any of the link coloring, or if you do want some of those other 2D network objects to show up within the videos themselves. And then we've got another example here. This is, again, one using that driver perspective camera position that we created. So in order, again, to set this one up, you'll just need to go play the simulation originally, select a vehicle that you'd want to record that driver perspective from. And then when you're creating a storyboard for that, you can set up your keyframe, and then you just need to set the start and dwell time based on when that vehicle is actually in the network. You'll just need to find a particular vehicle and then just kind of track what time the vehicle's in the network for, and then just set up your keyframe based on that timing. So there is another option as well if we wanted to add a bit more detail to the 3D videos. Again, you can't capture any other 2D network objects other than the signal heads within the 3D videos. But there is another option called 3D information signs, which will allow you to display some text information or update dynamically based on a selected attribute for a particular object. And these can be added and shown in 3D mode, and also can be recorded when you're creating videos. So in order to add any of these 3D information signs, first I'll just go to the Network Objects toolbar. This is kind of near the bottom part, right above the vehicles. And you can right-click on the 3D information signs and select that Show List option. And that's going to open up the list down here at the bottom of the screen. And this is where you can then add, click that plus button if you want to add in a new 3D information sign. And when you do click that plus button, this is going to open up a 3D info sign window here. And from here, you can then select a particular object you'd like to tie the sign to, as well as the particular object number. So in this case, we have selected the links for that reference object, and then we have selected link number 40 to kind of tie the sign to that particular object. And if you do want, there's a whole list. You can pick really any kind of network object in this drop-down menu here if you wanted to tie this to another particular object. This also can be tied to a particular vehicle. So if you do have, you can choose vehicles in the network here, and then again, just find a vehicle number in the network, and you can also set that reference object to that particular vehicle. And then from here, this is kind of where all that main editing for the contents of the information sign takes place. But you can just click the plus button here if you want to add in any information. So you can choose, there's quite a few different options. You can choose just the text value, which you can kind of see down here has been set up as just a 3D information sign 1 text field. You can also choose a particular attribute if you just want that the value or the name. Or you can choose some combinations of those. So you can show a text and an attribute value. You can show the attribute name and value. So a lot of different options here that you can kind of customize just depending on what kind of information you want to show within this particular sign. So in this case, here's another example with the contents displaying a text sign. So here we've selected the text attribute. And if you just click on the main box here, you can see we've added in some different text, and then you can also change the alignment of that text as well. And then here's another example where we've actually selected an attribute. So from here, we just selected attribute value. And then in this case, we chose to show the, we're looking at link speed, the average speed for the current simulation run for the current time interval for all the vehicles. And so in this case, we have the sign just displaying a text field here, just saying average speed. And then the speed of the link will actually dynamically update as the simulation is running and be displayed directly below it, kind of in this white space that's shown up. And then a lot of additional customization can also be done. You can change some different attributes for the sign itself. You can change like the width, how it's aligned, if you kind of want it to be fixed in place or to rotate with the camera. You can also change the location of the sign. And then down at the bottom is where you can change the font and the text and some of the coloring as well. And once you have these signs added, you'll see in 2D mode, they just show up as like these tiny boxes with a little info eye showing up. So you won't be able to see all of the information in 2D mode, but you can move these in 2D mode as well. A bit easier if you don't know exactly like your X and Y offset that you want to set. So when you're in 2D mode, you can just click and drag on any of these icons and kind of move them to a particular location if you don't want it to be directly on top of that object you've selected. And you can go kind of switch between 2D and 3D mode to see kind of how everything looks in 3D mode and then make some more edits in 2D mode. So here's what those two example signs look like. So we've got, again, one here on the right, just a text field just showing the roadway name. And then we also have one on the left showing that link speed. And again, this value will change dynamically as the simulation is running and just update based on that average speed coming from that link object. All right, so now we're going to kind of move away from the video recording and take a look at animation recording. And animation recording will actually allow you to play a simulation and then capture the information and then replay it at a later time. And what's nice about the animation is that you can actually play it in reverse. You can also fast forward if you want to look at a particular timestamp and then kind of review the simulation in more detail. So this is a good option if you've kind of got everything ready for your network, you've done your runs, and you wanted to maybe present this to someone or show it, but don't want to have to wait for the actual simulation to run. You can always record the animation ahead of time and then replay it using this option, and then you can just quickly move around and show others different timestamps within the simulation. And these files really only record certain information about the vehicle. So they're going to record things like the vehicle position, the turn signal, the color of the vehicle, and the 3D model. And then you'll also get the state of the signal head so that the signal head coloring can also change within that animation file. And so there is no other information recorded. It really is just position data and like the signal head state that's included just so that you can kind of replay those graphics at a later time. All right, so in order to set up the animation recordings, again, we'll go back to that presentation menu. And then if you go down near the bottom, you can select the animation recordings option. And this is going to open up a list down at the bottom of the network editor. And from here, you can again just select that plus button, and that will add a new animation recording. And each of the animation recordings, you can choose to record, set up a name for those. You can turn that particular animation recording on or off. And then you can set up the animation file name. So this is just like that AVI file name we set up earlier. You can just choose the location and the name for that file. And then you can also set up the start and the end time for which you want that animation to be recorded for. And then once you want to actually create those animation files, you'll just go back to the presentation menu, and then you can select record animations down at the bottom. And then from here, you can just play the simulation as normal. There's no other settings to set up or anything, so you can just play that. And then it'll record that animation that you have set up for that particular start and end time. And then once that recording is complete, that animation file will be displayed in that directory that you've got set up. So by default, if you just type in a name for that file, it'll typically be saved in that same location where that INPX file is stored. And then in order to play back that saved animation file, if you go back to that presentation menu, you can then select that continuous option. And this is going to open up a file explorer where you can just choose and select that animation file. And then from here, you can use these other buttons here. So you can use the single step or stop, or the single step reverse or continuous reverse in order to kind of navigate and play that animation back. There's also kind of a quick toolbar that you can add as well, which is particularly nice for replaying this animation information. So if you go up to the network editor, right above it, kind of in this blank space, and you just right click in here, you can then select the animation toolbar option, and that will display this animation toolbar up at the top. And this is just another quick way where you can, again, replay that simulation. You can go forward or backwards, and you can also jump to a particular simulation second if you want to see a particular time within that simulation. All right, so that kind of covers all of the video recording and animation recording. So from here, we can go ahead and take a look at our example file. All right, so here we've got our example file we've been working with. In here, we have a couple of camera positions set up by default. So first, I'll just in 2D mode, you can see here we've got a 2D overview position that we've already set up. And if you do want to see kind of what those look like, you can always just click on that particular position. It will kind of zoom in to that location. If you want to set up any new camera position for 2D mode, you can just kind of pan and then zoom into that particular location. And then you can click that camera icon and add a new one here. And again, here's where you can kind of hover over on the right side. If you did want to make any edits, so you can rename it or change that camera position or delete that camera position. So if we do find maybe we wanted to kind of shift this up a little bit, you can go back to that camera position and then just overwrite that. And it will pop up a little window here, just making sure and confirming that you do want to overwrite that with the current setting. And then similarly, if we switch over to 3D mode, again, you can do that either with the 2D 3D box icon up here at the top, or you can switch back and forth with that Control-D, just kind of a quick shortcut. In here, again, you can kind of zoom in and out like you would normally in 2D mode. There is this rotation option, and then once that's selected, you can just click with the mouse pointer to kind of navigate and kind of change the different angle and kind of get that rotated to the desired location. And then once you have that set up, you can then, again, just go back to that camera icon, and then you can click Add to drop in a new camera position. All right, and then again, here's where you can see some of those 3D information signs that we've also set up. So I'll also show you an example of setting up a new one of those as well. Okay, so I'm going to switch back into 2D mode here, and then take a look at some of those storyboards. So again, I'll go back to the presentation menu, and then click on Storyboards. And in here, we've got a few different videos created in here for you. So we've got, again, a 3D video, a 2D video, and then also that vehicle video where you can kind of see that driver's perspective. So if you do want to add in a new storyboard, here's where you can just click that plus button, and you can just type in a name for that. And here's where you can set up that file name. So you can either just type in a name here, or you can click on the little folder icon, and this will allow you to change that location if you did want to save this video somewhere else. And then for this particular video, I will update that frame rate to 10 in this case, just so that it'll be a real-time factor of 1, just so that we won't be at 2 times real factor, but instead we'll just record that video in real time. And then again, over on the right-hand side is where we can start to build up our keyframes. So you'll see here the 2D and 3D camera positions cannot be mixed. So depending on what you pick, so in this case, if I pick our 2D overview keyframe, and then if I add in another one, you'll see that the kind of the 3D ones are going to be removed from this pick list here. So that's just something to keep in mind. You can't mix those 2D and 3D camera positions. It'll have to be one or the other, just depending on the type of video you want to create. And so if I get those added in, again, I'll just create just some short. I'll just have this start kind of immediately, and then just create a short dwell time here for this one. So, and then a short start time here for the next one. So I'll just create a 10-second dwell for the first keyframe, and then have the second one start at 20 seconds so that we can have a 10-second transition time. And then here is where I'll let this also dwell for 10 seconds. Again, if you did want to make a change to the first one, so maybe we wanted to switch this to 15-second dwell, you can choose, check that shift option down at the bottom, and that will automatically bump up that second camera position for us as well. And then if you do want to preview this first, you can just right-click here on the storyboard, and you can choose a preview option. Let me drag over this window here. So here's where the you'll see like a very large preview window will show up here, just so that you can kind of see what that video is going to look like. And it will also show you the names of the camera positions up at the top. So in this case, you can see we're moving from the 2D overview to the intersection 3 camera position. And now we're sitting and dwelling at this particular position. So this is just a good way if you want to just see how everything looks and see how that transition time is before actually recording a video. So in this case, since I've got some other videos recorded, I'll uncheck these options, the first 3, and then just record this new video here. And then again, up in the presentation window, I'll just click the record AVIs and also turn on this 3D anti-aliasing option just to create a smoother video. And then if we click play here, it's going to go through the regular initialization process and kind of load up all those signal controllers. And then here's where it's going to ask you for that particular video compression you would like to use. And then you can just click OK. And since I started this video immediately at 0 seconds, that preview will immediately show up here and start to record, again, just depending on how you have those start times set up. And then you can, whenever that video is done, you can either wait for this to finish, or if you realize you need to make an edit and just want to stop this, you can just stop the simulation from here. And all of those, even the kind of early videos that were stopped, those will also show up within that directory as well. So here's that new video. Okay, let me just open this up with Windows Media Player. And here's where you can just see and view this particular video. All right. And then from here, we can go ahead and take a look at those 3D information signs. So these are kind of unlike the other 2D network objects, where these need to be added directly within that 3D information sign list. So if you right-click on the 3D information sign, you can then choose Show List here. And then this is where you can add in the new one. Again, you can pick from this list. There's the whole group of different network objects you can choose from. Again, I'll just probably pick links, and then you can choose from the list. You can see the whole list of different links that you can choose from. And then you can just pick that particular number. And here is where you can, again, change those contents. You could add in, if you wanted to add in an attribute name and value, that's going to allow you to just open up that attribute selection window where you can choose a different information. So maybe you want to just display the name. As long as your link has a name set up, you can see here, if I look at this particular contents we've got set up, we have this one by default, which I'll go ahead and remove. But here's where you can see the name that will show up on this particular sign. And then if you click OK, you'll see that new information sign's been dropped in. So I'll probably just move this up off the road a little bit, but you can see where that shows up. So you can, this again is a good way to add in additional information to those 3D videos so that you can just kind of see this quickly as you're recording the video and kind of get everyone oriented to what the different roadways are. All right, and then finally is, again, looking at those animation recordings. So if you go back to the presentation, you can then click on Record Animations, and then go to Animation Recording. And in here, we've already got one set up. Again, you can just click that plus button if you want to add a new animation file for a different time within the simulation. And then whenever you are ready to replay those animation files, again, you can just go back up to Presentation and click the Continuous option. And then you can go ahead and load that animation in here. And then this will immediately start playing. Again, you can right-click up here in the network editor to add in that animation toolbar. And this is where you can also move ahead if you wanted to go to a particular time in the simulation. It will also show it down here at the bottom. And then you can also replay and reverse as well if you also want that to just kind of see the simulation in more detail and just kind of zoom in on a particular time.